Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to unpack a story about a sunken ship. But this isn't just any old shipwreck. This one pulls back the curtain on the dark, kind of lawless underbelly of global shipping. It's a story that starts with a pirate attack, but believe me, it ends up somewhere way, way stranger.
Yeah, this is so much more than just a busted oil tanker or some huge insurance claim. At its core, this is a story about a guy named David Mockett, and he was murdered. Why? For getting way too close to a very, very expensive truth.
Okay, so before we even get to the high seas, I want you to picture this. Our story actually kicks off on a busy street in the port city of Aden in Yemen. The date, July 20th, 2011.
Now, this was no random act of violence, not in a city that's already known for being dangerous. The explosion was, well, it was small, it was precise, it was targeted. This was a professional hit, an assassination, plain and simple, designed to do two things: kill one man and send a chilling message to anyone else who might even think about asking the wrong questions.
So who was this guy, David Mockett? Well, his job was to be the insurance company's eyes and ears on the ground. You know, when a tree falls on your house, the insurance companies send someone out to check it out. He's that guy, but for a massive multi-million-dollar oil tanker. And let me tell you, what his eyes were seeing was making someone very, very nervous.
So why was he killed? What did he see? To get the answer, we have to rewind the clock 2 weeks. We're going on a voyage through the Gulf of Aden, which at the time was pretty much the most dangerous stretch of water on the entire planet.
The ship at the heart of all this was the Brillante Virtuoso. And when I say ship, I mean a behemoth. We're talking nearly 3 football fields long. And the cargo? 1 million barrels of crude oil, worth a cool $100 million. So you've got this massive floating vault, this absolute workhorse of global trade, and it's sailing straight into the heart of pirate territory.
So, according to the crew, here's what went down. They tell this terrifying but pretty straightforward story. They say they were hijacked by Somali pirates. The pirates storm the ship, take control, but then something goes wrong. There's this huge explosion, a fire breaks out, and the pirates just flee. They leave the ship a burning wreck. A total loss. On the surface, it sounds like a classic case of a pirate attack that went sideways.
So, a straightforward story, right? Piracy gone wrong? Case closed? Well, not for David Mockett. The moment he started his investigation, that neat little official story started to completely, and I mean completely, fall apart.
For an expert like Mockett, the whole thing just smelled wrong. The red flags were everywhere. First off, a night attack? He knew Somali pirates almost never did that. They strike in daylight. Then he gets on the ship. The fire was supposedly started by a rocket-propelled grenade, an RPG. But he couldn't find any evidence of an RPG strike. None. And all those AK-47s the crew talked about? Not a single bullet hole to be found anywhere. So he didn't have the full picture yet, but he knew one thing for sure. This was not your ordinary pirate attack.
And then came the warning. He's having dinner with the salvage crew. These are the guys hired by the ship's owner, by the way. And the captain looks at him and says this: "It's not exactly subtle, right?" Mockett was getting too close. And just a few days later, right as he was getting ready to use his local contacts in Yemen to really dig in, he was killed.
So with David Mockett dead, the whole fight over this insurance policy moves. It goes from the dangerous waters off the coast of Yemen all the way to a high-stakes courtroom in London.
And this is what it was all about. $80 million. Now, spurred on by Mockett's initial suspicions and, let's be real, his murder, the insurers at the famous Lloyd's of London did something they almost never do. They just said, nope, we're not paying. They were convinced this wasn't piracy. It was fraud, and they were ready for an epic legal fight to prove it.
So who's on the other side of this fight? The ship's owner, a guy named Marios Iliopoulos. He's this prominent Greek shipping tycoon, but get this, he's also a champion rally driver they call Super Mario. I mean, this is a guy who is famous for having nerves of steel, a super high tolerance for risk, and it seems like that applied to both his business and his hobbies. So the insurers, they don't mess around. They hire their own private investigators. We're talking ex-cops, who basically do the job that international police forces just didn't do. These guys track down witnesses all over the globe. They find a whistleblower from the salvage crew, who is now, by the way, living in hiding, and he testifies that he saw the whole fraud being planned. Then they find another crew member who admits that Iliopoulos himself threatened him to stick to the fake pirate story.
The conclusion in court was absolutely devastating for Iliopoulos. The judge didn't just throw out the claim, he called him a dishonest witness who had disgracefully threatened people. The ruling was crystal clear. The pirate attack was a total fabrication, a sham orchestrated by the owner to try and scam his insurers.
Okay, so the fraud gets exposed in a civil court. That's a huge win for the insurance company. But what about actual justice? What about justice for the crime, for the murder of David Mockett?
And this is where we get to the central, absolutely maddening part of this whole story. See, a civil court in London can rule on the money, but it has no power to send anyone to prison. And to this day, not a single person has faced criminal charges for any of this.
So why not? Well, it's because the whole thing happened in the cracks between countries. Think about it. You've got a Greek owner, a Filipino crew, a ship flying a Liberian flag, attacked in international waters, and then the investigator is murdered in Yemen. It's a complete jurisdictional nightmare. When a crime touches this many countries, the question, whose job is it to prosecute, usually gets a really frustrating answer. Nobody's. But wait, it gets even more unbelievable. While Marios Iliopoulos lost his $80 million insurance claim, you could argue he actually won. How? Well, during the lawsuit, the bank that had loaned him the money to buy the ship in the first place just wrote off the massive debt. So by destroying his own ship, he got out of paying tens of millions of dollars in loans that he couldn't afford anymore. So from a purely financial point of view, the fraud actually worked.
You know, the Brillante Virtuoso case isn't just one crazy story. It's a giant spotlight on a much bigger systemic problem. It basically reveals this world where massive multi-million-dollar crimes can happen right out in the open because the people doing them are confident that the mess of international law means they'll never, ever face any real consequences.
And all of that leaves us with a really, really unsettling question, doesn't it? I mean, this whole system of global shipping is something our entire economy depends on every single day. So if a crime this big, this audacious, with a trail of evidence this obvious, can go totally unpunished, it just makes you wonder what else is happening out there in the vast, lawless voids of the open ocean?